Hi, my name's Brad Young, and welcome to the Peak Performance Podcast. Today's an update episode. I'm going to update, things that have been going on, things that I've bought, used, as I've evaluated, for the Peak Performance Podcast, and give you an update on the stem cells, everything that's happened with that, things to look after, just a general update on all the things that I've been looking at, what I'm going to be doing going forward. Mainly I'm going to be getting a camera person. I'm going to do more video podcasting and have more people come on to do interviews, things like that, going forward. But, we start looking at the updates. The main update is going to be on the stem cells. And so, as you remember, back 8 weeks ago, I went and had stem cell therapy done at a very, very good place in Mexico that, that fighters and things, a lot of people go to get that kind of work done. And, it was a really, it was a good experience overall, and it helped my knee and my shoulder significantly. But the recovery time has been way different than I anticipated or anyone told me. So that's one of the things I want to talk about as we get started. And then we're going to talk about some of the equipment that I've purchased in between to help offset these things, and things that, can help you with injuries and things like that. Because, the main thing of peak performance is being able to actually participate and stay healthy. It's what athletes have. One of the hardest things to do is to stay healthy. Athletes are always hurt. You're always going to have some little nagging injuries, but I mean, there's ways to get around them and improve them. And so that's what, we look at on the Peak Performance Podcast, whether it's red light therapy or cold therapy, cryotherapy, whatever it is. And so as we look at the stem cells, all right, the first thing was my knee was bothering me. All right, I had fell in Dallas back a few years ago, and back in 2018, one of those bird scooters. I'd sliced my patella a little bit, hurt. All right, it regrew, but it was thin. And at the same time, the inside of my knee is hurting because I got hit by an idiot that was driving and reading on their phone. So they were reading a text message, doing something, and they didn't stop at the stop sign. And so I had to vault myself over their automobile while they were not even stopping, and so it was a mid-sized SUV. And so for me to be able to do that, I was glad. I'm still spry enough, but I hadn't been paying attention. It could have killed me and injured me, pretty badly. But what happened when I landed, my knee took more damage than I realized to it because of the impact. Because I mean, I'm still 205 pounds and I'm still jumping over, a vehicle that's not slowing down at a stop sign. And, they weren't going to, they just kept going. They finally stopped and realized they finally got before they went all the way out on the highway. And they wondered why I was so angry and upset. I mean, are you kidding me? You just hit me with your automobile. I could feel the weight of it. So that hurt the inside of the knee. And on top of that, I'd been sideswiped a few years ago. They didn't help any of this stuff at all for my shoulder. But back to the knee, the main reason, getting the knee repaired because it needed it, but also, I really want to attempt to break the world record in the leg press, because prior to going down there, a day or two before I left, I could run a few miles. This is after running. Now I keep this after running, and then I would leg press 820 pounds, 16 plates plus the weight of the leg press 75 times. Which equals out to being way more than record is. I mean, and I don't like to do it around a lot of people a lot of times because they get to staring because they just, they just can't believe it. That's like, somebody's max and I'm doing it 75 times easily. I mean, and so I've got to work on getting a little bit further. But what was going on is it was making the inside of that knee hurt. All right. It's aggravating it because the MCL got damaged, over the years, but also definitely from the car accident. And then my patella was thin. And so I needed to get, I needed to regrow everything in that knee. And so when I got down there, it was a scary thing because I had to be in a wheelchair for a few days. And I was not told that before. It kind of left that one off. And so, having to go back and having to operate and jump around on one leg and try to fly back and everything. It was a difficult process, and it hurt quite a bit. And so it took, probably 2 weeks, 3 weeks to really see very much. And by week 4, it felt great. You could feel everything, filling in. It started really filling in. And so the knee, the balance, there was some issues on the balance because when your body adjusts to one thing, it compensates for, like the MCL hurt, the patella, everything else. When it adjusts for that, then all of a sudden it gets fixed. Your body's not ready for it. It's one of the hard lessons I learned, the balance factor on it, everything else, because, when everything grows back in, you're not ready for it. So it's still kind of iffy on some things. It just, the balance, I'm still working on it. This is week 8, but, I ran fine on the knee. At week 5, my shoulder was still hurting, but I got back to running some. And so the first day I ran, I wasn't even running that hard. The knee felt good. Shoulder hurt like crazy for the first mile. And I'll get to that in a minute. But, I still ran a 25-minute 5K with not even no problem at all. And I wasn't even running that hard. I was just running. I was just out trying to test it out to see how I was going to do, trying not to pace myself too heavily. And so the knee healed up quickly. Here week 8, it feels really good. I ran 5 miles on it yesterday, no problem whatsoever. At first, the leg was weak because, I couldn't do that much for the first 30 days. And so it naturally gets weaker. And so what was happening is initially my left leg was having to do more pull work. And so my left leg actually was hurting from the run. It was tightening it up and making it pull harder to compensate for my right leg where the knee that, it healed before it could get stronger. And so that's one thing that, I wish I did more physical therapy, but the instructions were not clear enough and I didn't have enough understanding, but I do now. So just, make sure you're doing physical therapy and understanding, you gotta start working it by week 2 to really have it. But luckily I walked my dog and, walked and did different things and moved around, and the knee turned out fantastic. Shoulder, on the other hand, has been different. And so the shoulder healed fine. Now, don't get me wrong, it healed fine. After I ran that 5K on the first day, I went back home. I said, okay, tomorrow I'm going to run, and then I'm going to do push-ups, do calisthenics, stuff like that, because the shoulder was still hurting quite a bit at week 5, 6, 7. It's still, I'm in week 8 right now, and it's still not 100%, because what happened is it got frozen because I kept it still, but I knew it had healed up quite a bit because the next day I went and I ran like 1.5 miles, and I come back from it, and the first thing I did was push-ups. So I did 100, but I really only did like 95 because I cheated a little bit on the last 5. I was just kind of slinging just to see, but I noticed the shoulder was strong on the front. So any of the rotator, all the bicep tendon stuff was better, even though it was sore, it didn't want to move. Because the thing of it is when the shoulder got still for too long and wasn't getting enough work, it started freezing. And so I ended up with frozen shoulder. So while it healed internally, I still got frozen shoulder. But, nobody was aware of how bad that was going to be because the stem cells cause inflammation. And so the inflammation makes you swell up inside of, cause you to inflame. And so I couldn't take anything anti-inflammatory, didn't have anything in my diet, etc. Up until week 5, I started taking ibuprofen and stuff like that again, some to work on it because it was still hurting pretty bad. The front, I could barely move it. And so when I went to see a local stem cell person that actually does my TRT pellets, we talked about it. And so I ended up buying a machine to help with that. And so, it's essentially a massage machine that provides shock therapy. And so essentially it shocks and it helps stimulate the stem cells to keep them growing, because he said, basically this is a very important tendon that's still healing because it continues to heal for quite some time. And so So I bought the Shockwave, and so the Shockwave, instead of paying somebody, you could pay $300 to get, treatment and stuff. I just bought the machine. You just buy the machine. It's for me, it's better off, and you can just do your therapy at home. And so I bought the machine because the bicep tendon, all through the rotator cuff were still really sore. I mean, we're talking really, really sore. Didn't want to move, still in quite a bit of pain. And of course, the back of my shoulder was hurting too because it froze. What happened is you don't move the front, your back starts, freeze up. So I bought the Shockwave machine and started doing my own physical therapy and, worked really hard that I was not doing near enough. Because the back of the shoulder was still tight. It got better. It was really, really sore. And it took weeks of just working through it to get that front shoulder, get everything together. But it just wasn't getting everything done. And so the Shockwave was good. And so I bought a massage chair to help with some of the tightness and the soreness that I was having. Because the thing about it is when, your shoulder sets up like that, because I couldn't move it good. I could not move it. And when it's that sore and that tight, you're just not wanting to do a whole lot with it. I was afraid I was going to tear something or hurt something. I didn't get enough instructions, and I called and talked to him, but it just wasn't enough. And I should have went to see a physical therapist and got that done. But I had to be careful with that because your immune system is weak after the stem cell. So long story short, I got the massage chair and that started loosening up like my shoulder blades, started loosening up some of those. I mean, you could really feel it in there. That machine does good. I bought the massage chair. It massages your feet, your lower back, your upper back, your traps. And that's what was tight was my upper back and my traps because, the frozen shoulder affects everything around it. And so I bought that. So I'm using that. I'm using the TENS unit. I'm using, massagers, getting deep, doing everything I can to stretch. It's still not getting any better. It's still not getting as good as I thought it should have been, which I prepared to take 2 months off versus the 1 month because I didn't figure that I was going to be, just miraculously cured in 1 month. And that's what happened. And so we get to, month 2. So I went to see my chiropractor. All right. Chiropractor helps out a lot, helps, line everything. But also my chiropractor is listen, he's one of the best that I've ever had. He's very good. I mean, he is so good because he's skilled and he's knowledgeable. He was a Division I athlete, and I mean, and you couldn't ask for a better person. And his wife are great people. They treat everybody so well, and they're knowledgeable. And that's the thing about it, because you can treat people well but not be knowledgeable, and I still wouldn't come back. But they're knowledgeable. They have a really good perspective on things. They understand things in depth as far as the way the human body goes, your motion and everything. So he started doing ART to help improve the motion on my shoulder. And so when he started doing that, it started loosening up. And so I said, okay, I'm gonna work on some physical therapy. And so as soon as I started doing that, I realized I couldn't do the angel wings. And angel wings, what it is where you put your you put your butt against the wall, you put your upper back against the wall, and you put your arms out like angel wings. You put them like your shoulders, your elbows go straight out from your body and your hands go up. Well, when I did that, I mean, I'm quite a few inches from being able to rotate my left arm. I mean, it was very, very tight. I'm talking, just not happening, And so as I was doing the exercises, going through all that, I realized I'm not even close. I've got to start, getting some more motion in there, and I got to start doing these things. And so I started, working on those, doing the weights, doing the things to strengthen that arm. But what had happened, I was creating more inflammation. And so what I had to do is I had to combine in massage therapy to help clear this out. And so I had to go for an hour and a half, 2 weeks in a row to get them to work deep in that shoulder out. Because what happens when you get the frozen shoulder, like I said, everything's healed. That's the thing about everything healed, but you still can get frozen shoulder by not having the motion. And I am 47 years old with a lot of miles on it. I mean, worked out for decades. I work out hard and intense. I believe in peak performance. I believe in putting in your best every time you go out, and I do it. I'm intense, and so that's would have been a very hard thing for me as well, is being able to adjust that intensity and with not hurting yourself and being, you being sensible. But so I went the first time, and it really made a difference on the motion. So I kept on, kept on, kept on. And so in between times, what I did is I bought a new ice bath and a new chiller to do cold therapy because I got very poor customer service from the cryotherapy people here in Jackson, Tennessee, that I moved into a massage place, and their customer service went to garbage. They were rude, just not good people. And I'm going to talk about them when I go speak in other places about how shitty their customer service was compared to what it was before for what it currently is. But so I decided, you know what, I could buy my own cryo machine if I need to, and and test it for the Peak Performance Podcast. And that's what I'm going to do in the future, because the cryo seemed to help when I did it for a couple months. But when people are rude to you and their customer service is garbage, all of a sudden you don't want to go there. Because you just want to do it. So I bought a chiller, and I've got the cold therapy going. And so along with the massage, I threw in the cold therapy. And at the same time, we worked on it and got my whirlpool going to where I could take hot whirlpool baths at the same time. And so we worked on these things, got this to hot cold therapy going, and got that moving. So after that first deep tissue massage, it helped a lot. So I went and see my chiropractor, and we worked on the ART to work on it more to get that motion going, because he gets deeper and is more precise than a massage therapist is. Massage therapist gets deep, and it really helps loosen up those muscles. It helps loosen the tendons up. It helps significantly. I highly recommend it if you ever have frozen shoulder to get that, because the cost is way less than your pain is. And as I get to do it, I'm going to run 100 miles in March. I got to get ready. I got to have all these things moving. But all these therapies made a difference. Just like the shock wave, it helped a bicep tendon. Made all the difference in the world in getting that shoulder even moving because it was in such pain. The cold therapy helped after started getting the deep tissue massage and the ART to help take the swelling down. It helped to get the inflammation under control, to be able to, and I do it every morning now. I go out every single morning. I go out and I sit for 5 minutes in the cold, 55 degrees every morning. I can even get it a little bit lower, but I did make the mistake of getting it to 45 one time. And that's a little too cold first thing in the morning when you're starting. I'm going to work my way back down to that, but not right now. But the cold therapy started making a difference. I could tell a difference, because I could only do light workouts. I wasn't able to work out much, and I was getting really frustrated. So another thing that happens is mentally, it starts to bother you because I could not perform like I was. I go in, I could barely work out. The back of my shoulder would just hurt when I would bench anything. It would really hurt when I'm doing dips. And I remember before I had this, these procedures done, I was doing 90 pounds because we don't have the 100 anymore. I was doing 245 plates in between my legs on a chain and doing real dips, real full body dips. I was doing anywhere from 32 to 35 dips on my last round of my rounds. So, I weigh 205 plus 90 at 295, just say 300 pounds, 300 pounds on the dip pressure 35 times. That's a lot. I don't see people that can even do that once, and I do it 35 times. So that was one of my real issues. And it was up until yesterday, as far as, the recovery, because when you're used to being able to do that, and I could go and I could do 25 dips, but it hurt. And so every time I would try to do them, and so I've been doing different exercises, been doing way more stretches and things like that. I said, well, you know what? I need to go ahead and get one more deep tissue. And so I went and got another deep tissue. And that was last week. And it made a significant difference. And I probably need to get another one to finish everything out, but it got the motion better, in my shoulder. It helped my calves. But mainly getting deep into that shoulder and getting it moving. And so it made a big difference. But then yesterday I went and got ART again in the shoulder, and it made all the difference in the world because that finishes everything off. The doctor that does that, I mean, he does a fantastic job. And I mean, we spend just a few minutes doing it, but he knows where to push in there, and it really loosens that shoulder up. So yesterday I was doing my rounds, and so I was still going easy because I'm scared to hurt something because it still hurts back in the back of my shoulder right there. It's still there's some it's frozen. It's still it's still healing. There's still some things going on even at week 8. And so on round 2, I took 45 pounds and put between my legs on the chain, and I did 25 dips, and it was no problem. There was still a little bit of pain, and so that scares me on the pain side of it. But I realized I had plenty of strength. It felt like it didn't weigh anything. I could have easily done the 90 like that. So I know that it's coming back, but it's a scary process. So, when you start looking at these things, make sure you're doing your physical therapy. Talk to somebody, do physical therapy with it. Make sure you're understanding what all you have to do, because I should have never let that shoulder get so frozen, but it hurts so bad. The inflammation was so bad. And just like the doctor said, he said, you know what? Nobody could have really predicted it because every case is different. And I had more damage in there than we realized. There was more damage because it's years and years after you tear a labrum. I mean, there's damage in there, but it's healed. I feel very good about it right now. I can almost get the full angel wings. And because I tried as soon as I left the chiropractor yesterday, I tried it, boom, did it. And then I went and ran 5 miles just a few hours later. So, I'm getting back towards that peak performance. I'm ready to, start working on my speed and strength and getting all the way back. But it's a big deal. That the thing of it is, getting these things, because, being able to run without, shoulder pain is going to be a huge thing, because that's the thing. Before I've had to buy devices and stuff because, having that shoulder issue, that label makes everything around you, makes everything work harder. So it causes you to have cramps, your neck hurts, you have all these other problems just from that one weakness in there. And so what I've started doing as well is I've taken a light dumbbell and I'm doing all the negatives. I'm doing all the way around the shoulder to help make sure it's strong and stable. I'm still having some issues with some of the overhead pressing, but it's not that bad. It's just really just kind of working through some of it. Because again, when the stem cells go in and they start regenerating cartilage tissue and all these things, it's not fun. It hurts. Anybody says it doesn't hurt, they didn't get enough in there. Because when my MCL was growing back in my knee, oh, it really hurt. I mean, you could tell it. I mean, but it was growing. It's just like growing pains. I mean, it was growing back and it hurt, but it grew back. I got to get an MRI done when if we end up doing any more work, I'm going to go back down and to the facility and get an MRI done and get everything looked at, see the growth and everything. 'Cause they want to document it, especially with what I'm trying to do. And I have not did heavy leg presses yet. We're at week 8. I was not trying to do it because I do so much weight, but it doesn't feel heavy to me on the leg press because, I walk around and I have 29-inch thighs. I mean, my legs are 29 inches out there. They have been for a very long time. My calves look small, but they're 18 inches. So it's funny because, the calves are decent size, but they look really skinny compared to my thighs. It's just from years and years of running and doing stuff. And I grew up, in active work and doing things. And so, I mean, you build them up over the years, but, I highly recommend, the stem cell therapy. It helps regenerate so many things. I mean, but you got to be ready for problems and things that happen. You got to look at recovery methods. The massage chair makes all the difference. I use the massage chair every day to continue to help loosen everything up and keep it from having any kind of stiffness, any kind of, things, in that shoulder. Still using massage guns, stretching, doing everything to keep it going, because I'm sure it's going to be another 4 to 6 weeks to get everything back to 100% with the no pain. But it's really made a big difference in my life. Now I'm confident. I'll be able to go run that 100 miles without having a bunch of problems. I ain't got to worry about the knee maybe swelling up or having issues out of that, because all that stuff's healed back, feels good. that inner knee was bothering me. When I was, well, it was bothering me when I was doing my weighted runs, which, I run with a 20-pound vest. And so I do that in the heat, which is, it's tough. It's not for everybody. But I would work out and run in a 20-pound vest when it's 100 plus degrees outside, because, I always want to push for peak performance and not be weak. That's the thing about it, because, you got to keep getting stronger and better. No matter what your age, you got to keep going. And that's what I'm working on. But, the peak performance side of it, the shoulder, I'd say is probably 90% now. I've still got more to do on it. I mean, there's still some soreness. I'm still doing a lot of stretches, but, it's going to be back to where I'll be able to run that 100 miles. I'm going to be able to, do other things and set more goals and do these things. I'm going to document them. And I'm going to be taking the PT test again and all those things, because those were in the early episodes. And so, I'm going to have short clips from every episode of what we're doing, because I want to make it where people can see it, because, you listen to me and that's great. I mean, we got a lot of listeners. I have a whole lot of listeners, and I appreciate every one of you guys that tune in and listen, because I try to cover topics that are going to be related to what, we're all looking at, peak performance mentally, physically, all these things, looking at new technologies, looking at old technologies, I mean, and I'm going to continue to look at old workout methods, old programs, because some of the most effective things that, have ever happened, are old, these methods, because methods and things change, but some things are timeless. So that's what, some things I'm going to look at over the next few episodes are going to be, some of the Russian powerlifting methods. Because, I mean, they were fantastic. I mean, unbelievable powerlifters. And, we're not going to, we're going to even look at the drugs they may or may not have been taking. But the main thing we're going to look at is their methods, because their methods are timeless. We're going to look at different powerlifting methods. We're going to look at different things to be, we're going to go back again to elite CrossFit athletes. We're going to look at elite bodybuilders, look at elite athletes and what they do and how they train mentally and physically. Look at elite coaches. We're going to look at all these things going forward, because that's what this is all about. It's about peak performance. It's about, becoming your best self. It's about achieving that peak performance, and too many people, they quit decades before they should. I'm 47 years old and I'm still very active. I still go out. I mean, I hammer it when especially as I get, over these stem cell injections and all the things I've had to do. I mean, I'm going to be hammering even harder, because, while life is short, you got to be able to maintain a level of performance, because it's kind of like when people retire. And I know a lot of people, I got friends that I worked with and stuff over the years that retire. And they always end up going back, because they get that stimulation, that mental stimulation, because it's what they're accustomed to. They love to travel. They love to do those things. And just like with me, I mean, I miss the traveling like I used to do. So we're going to be traveling more for this podcast and others, because the thing of it is like when people retire, they don't know what to do a lot of times, but if you're working on your peak performance, you're going to always have stuff to do. You're always going to be creating new goals. You're going to be creating new stuff. You're going to have things that you can do that's going to make you better at what you're doing. And that's what peak performance is all about. And, so we're going to cover that. I'm going to look at those aspects of it too, of how to maintain it throughout time. Because, as you age, that doesn't mean you have to slow down. It means you have to be wiser, train smarter, work on being injury free. That's what I work on every single day, is being injury free. That's the main thing that I work on, is to not have injuries, prevent injuries. Just like with my knee. Okay. If I had not worked out for all these years and been in the physical shape I was in, when I fell on that sidewalk, as hard as that hit, if I didn't have everything around me to protect and stop from being even a harder, worse impact, I mean, it would have completely knocked that patella out, knocked my knee off. I would have, could have been crippled for life. But I worked out for decades. I pushed myself hard. I believe in it. I may not always have a six pack, but I always have some abs, and I'm always in a very good physical shape because you don't have to have a six pack to be in prime physical shape because some of your elite athletes are around that 10-12% body fat or a little bit above, and that's where I'm at. I might be 10, 12, 15 right through that area. It goes down and up, but it really don't matter for the activities that I do. You know, your abs are for showing off. I mean, it's good. It's a sign of elite physical conditioning and performance, but you need that fat sometimes. Depending on what you're doing. So there's a lot of things to look at from that aspect. So we're going to look at all those things. We're going to look at how healthy, because when you look at it, when I get down to weights that to where abs really, really show down, I mean, I have to cut calories down to 1,850 or lower. That's hard to do. Be able to still work out and do things, and so you become weaker. When I know people that do shows and stuff, they get their calories down so low sometimes. Their macros are so low, they're so weak and drained. I mean, after the show, they eat like crazy because they've had to drain to get down to where you can see all those indentions. So people don't really, people need to think about that. Is as we're in a social media era where there's everybody seems to have a six pack, yada yada yada. That's not the case, and it's not always necessarily healthy. So we're going to look at the safe body fat percentages, things like that for different sports, because different sports and different things you do require different levels of body fat, etc. So we're going to look at all these things going forward. We're going to have more videos, clips, things like that to go along with the show. But anyway, my name's Brad Young. This has been the Peak Performance Podcast. Thank you for listening, and have a great week.